you, Tim. So as Tim said, yeah, I'm head of partnerships for the south of England at Sustrans. I also sit on the One City Transport Board, and I'm a director of Bristol Green Capital Partnership. But most of my work is focused here in the west of England. Next slide. Thanks, Tim. Today I'm going to try to define what a livable neighbourhood is. I'm going to talk through some of the challenges that I think livable neighbourhoods can overcome, introduce some of the facts about the positive impacts of them, and then also try to leave you with 3 key things that I'd like you to take away into your discussion groups later on. Next slide. So what does livable mean? Put simply, a dictionary definition, livable means something that makes life worth living. And in our street and neighbourhood context, we want a city that makes our life worth living. We want streets and spaces that support and nurture us as residents. Next slide. I'd argue at the moment that our physical environment no longer really nurtures us. At best, it's benign, and at worst, it does the opposite. About 80% of the public space that we have in the city is made up of the road network. I just want you to take a moment to imagine for a second an outdoor space in Bristol that you really enjoy spending time in. Now, it might be your back garden if you're lucky enough to have one, a local park, somewhere like the Harbourside, or even Broadmead or Cabot Circus. Now, chances are the place you're imagining isn't directly outside your front door, and chances are the place you do have in mind is somewhere where there aren't many cars. Now, livable neighbourhoods aim to make the space outside your front door more enjoyable to spend time in, that are quieter, with less passing traffic that makes it safe to play, walk and cycle in. Now, they do this by filtering traffic, effectively acting like a sieve, allowing only the things that you want to be able to pass through an area. It would be an area no more than about a 15-minute walk from one edge to another, or about 1.5 kilometres. And car access, importantly, is always maintained to properties. So you'd still be able to drive and park to your outside your house as normal and receive deliveries. But crucially, running traffic can't pass from one edge of the area to another without turning back. Now, this keeps through traffic where it's supposed to be on the main road network. Next slide, please. You've seen this this image already this morning from Adrian, but I always think it's worth kind of bringing it back into the forefront of people's minds. Really, there's been a significant increase, about 25% increase in the amount of through traffic on residential streets over the past decade, and this has a negative impact on community resilience. So, as Adrian explained, that image is from a study that was conducted in the States in the 1960s by Donald Appleyard, that compared social interaction on 3 streets, and exactly as Adrian said, replicated in Bristol in 2008 by Josh Hart, a master's student. And the study shows that the busier your street, the less you know your neighbours, the less likely you are to stand and chat on a street corner. And it's these interactions that really underpin our society. We are, after all, a social species as humans. But traffic erodes these connections, and effectively traffic erodes the fabric of society. Now, for children, the physical impact of traffic is pretty acute. I'd argue for a child growing up today in Bristol that it's a pretty grim picture. The most common cause of death for children aged between 5 and 14 is being hit by a vehicle. And there is a very real prospect that children born in this decade will live a shorter life than their parents. 4 in 5 children don't get the recommended 1 hour of physical activity each day, and 2 in 5 adults don't get recommended 2.5 hours a week. Now, in the 1930s, children spent the bulk of their time playing outside with the ability to roam freely without parental supervision. If you skip forward a few generations to the 70s and 80s, now that had shrunk to about a square mile. Today's children only play in gardens unsupervised, and that's if they're lucky enough to have one, spending only 4% of their time outdoors. Traffic has grown on UK roads 12-fold since 1949. And whilst this has given us some freedoms and unlocked long distance travel, for children and our neighbourhoods, this has led to an ever shrinking world. Next slide, please. Now, livable neighbourhoods can be delivered through a series of different measures. And as Daisy said, really, with 20-minute neighbours, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And they absolutely have to be tailored to the neighbourhood and to the residents and the types of journeys that people make. But the types of measures that could be introduced could include things like modal filters, so road closures that enable people on foot or bike to pass through an area. Things like pocket parks, as you can see in the image there, with improved street trees and greenery. Bus gates that allow public transport vehicles to pass through an area, and taxis but stop the cars, and things like band turned and one-way streets. Next slide, please. Now, they are all measures that we've taken in Bristol, but we've usually taken them in one place only at once, rather than across a whole area. You've already seen this, the photo in the top left-hand corner there of a before and after shot of Queen Square. And Queen Square might even have been one of the places that you were thinking of earlier. Now, there was severe opposition to the removal of the inner city ring road from the square when the closure was planned in 1992. And yet today, the square is listed by the Post as one of the best things that has ever happened to Bristol. The top middle image is from the Dings home zone that Sustrans was involved in delivering in the early 2000s, where measures were taken to make some streets more livable by reducing the dominance of cars, and in this case, enabling children to play out in the street. In the bottom left is Frogmarsh in Easton, where the road was closed under the railway bridge outside Bannerman Road School. There was fierce opposition to the changes here, with headlines suggesting that it would cause a split in the community and cause crashes on other adjacent roads, none of which has really been borne out to be true. And fast forward to last summer, and we've seen the same again, headlines resulting from possible changes to St Mark's Road, with traders threatening to move out of the area if a road is closed or pedestrianised. So the point I'm trying to make is that there will always be vocal opposition to these changes, and that's absolutely not unique to Bristol. The image in the top right is Councillor Clyde Lokes, who you will hear from later, being confronted by traders in Waltham Forest, traders who were staging a funeral for their own businesses. But I'll let him show you how much his local high street has changed since 2016. Next slide, please. But there are facts behind the headlines. Studies have shown that local businesses benefit from motor traffic restrictions. The evidence shows that those who walk to a high street spend about 40% more than those who drive, and that's because they visit more often. And there's also evidence to show that shop vacancy rates are higher where there's more traffic. This was absolutely true in Queen Square, where vacancies for offices dropped after the road was closed. The environment was improved, so people wanted to spend more time there. Studies show that measures used in low traffic neighbourhoods, such as installing planters or bollards, can change how people drive their cars. Miriam mentioned earlier that some people might stop making particular trips. They might combine multiple trips into one, travel at a different time of day that's less congested, or switch to public transport, walking or cycling. So instead of traffic displacement, where you move the problem from one area to another, there's actually traffic evaporation. There are simply fewer car movements in the system. So for example, in a livable neighbourhood in Walthamstow Village, the number of cars using main roads in the area did initially increase by about between 3 and 11%, but the number of vehicles on residential roads decreased by 56%. That meant that across the whole area, there are around 10,000 fewer vehicles every day in the network, which is an overall reduction in traffic of 16%. And there's sometimes concern that low traffic neighbourhoods slow emergency vehicles. And that's actually been examined by the University of Westminster using London Fire Brigade data in Waltham Forest, where from 2015, a livable neighbourhood has been implemented. There's no evidence that response times have been affected inside a low traffic neighbourhood, and actually some evidence to show that response times have been improved. And the final slide for me, please, Tim. I just want to leave you with 3 key messages to take away into your deliberations and discussion. Adrian talked about that dose response to physical activity, that if only 10% more adults in Bristol achieved the recommended levels of physical activity per week, life expectancy would increase by over 4 years across the city. In Waltham Forest, where a livable neighbourhood has been implemented, it led to an increase in walking of 30 minutes a week, or about 1/5 of the recommended weekly activity. The second point is simply, we drive too much. About 40% of all our journeys by car in our region are less than 2 kilometres. That's the equivalent of a 30-minute walk or a 15-minute cycle. We need to reduce the amount we drive by up to 60%, as studies have shown, in order to meet our net zero carbon targets. And finally, the evidence shows that people support these measures regardless of what the headlines say. The Your City, Our Future survey really has shown us that the vast majority of Bristol residents value the ability to move freely around the city without a car. The crucial thing to get right is to take people with us through really, really good engagement. We need to support people to influence decision-making that impacts their lives. And we need to ensure that a vocal minority does not have the power to veto changes that will have really, really wide-reaching benefits. Thank you very much.